Hey guys, welcome to DanQ8000's Best Playthroughs of 2010 series, where you, the viewer, gets to decide what playthrough, gameplay, or DLC was the best in your opinion of 2010. In this first video, I look at games that I covered in the first quarter of 2010, from January to March. Now, as a side note, I'd like to mention that these games may not have necessarily come out in 2010, but I did cover them in this year and at that time frame. So without further ado, let's just get into it. First game on our agenda, and the first game I actually did a full playthrough on, is of course one of my favorite games of this year, Mass Effect 2. Now Mass Effect 2 was indeed a very long game, and I was still new when it came to playthroughs at this time. This was the first playthrough that had no commentary, a full playthrough without commentary. It was just direct recording. I had just got my PVR pretty much, still new to it, and I wanted to do a Mass Effect playthrough. However, this game was actually very long, and I didn't play it to its fullest potential, which I kind of regret, because this game had a bunch of things that had to be seen for those of you who never did. Now, also, it was at this era that I was just first transitioning into playthroughs from my older format of skate videos, and considering though that it was my first time through, I'd say it wasn't bad at all. But you have to look at the fact that even though it wasn't a very long playthrough for the type of game it was, I did cover the main story ground. However, like I said, I did prefer that I covered most of the whole game instead of just this one section, because I ended up, if you did watch it, I ended up getting probably the worst ending possible, where pretty much everybody died, so including our main character, Commander Shepard. So unfortunately, it wasn't my best playthrough in my opinion, but who knows? Maybe you guys liked it. You guys like watching my Mass Effect 2 playthrough. Anyway, first game up is Mass Effect 2. The second game that I actually covered that actually did get me some notable fame, if you will, into the YouTube community of playthroughs was in fact a game that had released that February, which was, of course, Heavy Rain. Now, Heavy Rain was one of the first games that I ever played that had this style of gameplay, where it was what they called an interactive drama. Now, going in, people looked at it and they're like, wow, this looks really good. But no one knew what they would expect once they got their hands on it. Now, this was, like I said, a completely new style of gameplay, and it wasn't really an action game per se. But what type of game, when you're watching a Law & Order or a CSI or some sort of cop show where you wanted to get in it and control how things were doing, like look at the evidence, do all anything a cop normally would, that's pretty much what you could do with Heavy Rain. And depending on what you did, similar to an RPG, how you did it, if you failed, depending on the decisions you made, you would get a different outcome. Now, there were multiple game endings that I've seen every one myself personally, and each one is affects you emotionally depending on what you did. If you did good, if you failed, or just it was a neutral. Even a neutral one had a good, decent feel to it, if you will. So this game actually brought me a bit of, like I said before, fame into YouTube, and I got a lot of my subscribers from my Heavy Rain playthrough, and a lot of comments were witty and funny, in my opinion, according to what other people have said too. So Heavy Rain, the second game, vote it if you like it. And the final game that I actually covered during 2010 was actually one that did not release this year. It released 5 years ago in 2005. Now, I have made many mentions of it over, the entire year that I've played it. And this is probably one of my favorite games ever. And that game, of course, is Condemned Criminal Origins. And it was a game that really defied a new survival horror mixed with a forensic investigation. It was the perfect blend of gaming styles, and the storyline was brilliant. The gameplay was great. It was I don't know what else to say. Condemned, I had to cover it, even though the game came out 5 years ago. I had to play the game, and I'd always wanted to do a playthrough of Condemned. Well, in this case, it was a walkthrough, since I had played these games to death, and I knew exactly where everything was. Thought, fuck it, let's make a walkthrough. Definitely one of my favorite games. Like I said, one of my favorite playthroughs that I did, considering I had a lot of there were a lot of comedic elements, and I also allowed people who have never seen the game before to get scared, so I wouldn't spoil a section. I wouldn't like, oh, here comes a scary, here comes a scary spot. But I would let them get scared. I'd shut my mouth when I felt was necessary, and when it wasn't necessary, people would hear my commentary, which I think would made a perfect blend of the two, making it a great a great contender for best playthrough of first quarter 2010. So let's see what you guys think. Condemned Criminal Origins, final game of first quarter. So what was your favorite playthrough of 2010's first quarter? Let me know in the comments below.